So he's going to be gradually turning invisible, but this is how I'm going to do it. It's going to be practical effects, which is my world, as much as possible.
So I'm Ken Hegan, and this is the Canadian Film Salon, put on by the First Weekend Club here at the Vancouver Public Library. I'm the writer-in-residence, and I'm very excited to talk to Geoff Redknap about his film, The Unseen. I was really keen on showing it here at the library because I love genre films, and I want to hear as much as I can about your background and just why this story. And I mean, let's get into it.
Sure. I started thinking about this project. I have a background in makeup effects, and genre films have always meant a lot to me. And but I mean, people ask me what my favorite films are, and I say good films. So it was my goal to make a good genre film, because some genre films tend to be blood and guts, over the top. I wanted to make something that I considered a good film, but still had a genre element in it. And so I started thinking about, what could be done. I had a few short films that were genre based, and I was racking my brain, and I just woke up one day thinking about The Invisible Man. And what I thought was, well, we haven't seen that done in a long time, and we haven't seen it done particularly well.
Chevy Chase was the last one?
Most people go to Hollow Man.
Oh, Hollow Man, right? Owen Wilson.
Hogan, and it was, it did its thing, and it did embrace one thing about the source material that most of the Invisible Man movies kind of gloss over, and that was that it basically, the process of becoming invisible turns the man into a megalomaniac, and he becomes basically insane.
Wait, was that Kevin Bacon?
Yeah.
Kevin Bacon, I'm sorry, right.
So they embrace the dark side, because if you go back to the H.G. Wells novel, it starts out as a lab experiment. This guy achieves something, and it's quite exciting and challenging, and as the story progresses, he becomes he becomes a megalomaniac. He becomes convinced that he is a superior being to the rest of the world, and he has the privilege to do whatever he wants. So that's how the Invisible Man ends up killing people and taking whatever.
So he's not less man, he's more.
He's superior. And I think Hollow Man tried to embrace that idea that Kevin Bacon starts out as a scientist, but then believes that he's a super being and can do whatever he wants. And they took that down a rather dark path. And I think at the time the technology, the vis effects were exciting, but I think the plot was really just kind of ugly.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the last. And Chevy Chase did something back in the, I don't forget when, early 90s, I think. Memoirs of an Invisible Man, which was a little different, but Chevy Chase put a comedic flavor on it, which kind of took the serious out of it. So I just thought, we haven't seen that done in a while. So what can I do with that? So I went to my producer and I said, I've been thinking about The Invisible Man. And she was like, oh, that's I like that idea. But her one reservation was part of trying to get a film made is attaching a bankable actor or actress. And she said, we're going to put all this energy into casting someone to play the lead, and 10 minutes in, they're going to be invisible. So I was like, you're right. It's disembodied voices and hats floating around, and you get Johnny Depp or something, and he's not even on screen.
Just money wasted.
And so that sent me back to the drawing board for a minute, and then I came back.
And you, with your special effects background, he's worked on everything from the X-Files to Deadpool to, Star Trek, beyond. Did you want and need to write something that relied on your special effects chops? Was that a challenge you set up for yourself?
Not so much a challenge. I just found early on making short films, when you're looking for funding, it helps to embrace what you know. When you present, if someone looked at my resume of all these genre films and big budget makeup effects projects, and I said, no, I want to do a romantic comedy, they might go, well, why you?
Right.
But you go, I want to do a horror comedy, and it's going to have these elements that I'm very familiar with. It helps encourage them. So again, it just sort of built a foundation of bringing what I know to my projects,
Makes sense.
which I didn't mind doing, because I like genre movies. the movie that started it all for me was Jaws, and it's all about a big practical effects shark, and so I don't mind bringing it. I just don't want it to be all about that, and that's why I bring it. But I try to make it mostly about the story.
Great.
So in the case of The Unseen, it did have a makeup effects application to it, but it really was more about a family and the story of what this event would mean to a family. Somebody becoming invisible. And that's how we changed it and made it our own Invisible Man story. We turned it from a lab experiment gone wrong to a mysterious genetic condition that was progressively turning him invisible.
And he inherited this condition.
You come to understand that's the story. Because again, when we decided to do an Invisible Man film, I thought, well, so we don't do the same thing that's been done over and over. Let's think about how we can take it into a new place. And the first thing I thought was, let's get rid of the lab experiment.
Yeah.
And
the cheesy mad scientist.
Yeah. It's not a mad scientist. He doesn't work in some big research facility. There's not some corporate enemy hovering above them. I just thought, get rid of the lab. It's not a science experiment. It's a genetic condition that's in his genes, and it manifests itself, and he starts fading away piece by piece.
Jesus.
And that's how I appeased my producers with her very important note of, let's not cast someone who's not going to be on screen. So we turned it into a condition where he was disappearing slowly. And what that really did story-wise is that it reversed the whole thing, and it turned it from instead of becoming invisible, head to toe instantaneous, and dealing with the ramifications of that, you're dealing with someone who is gradually disappearing. So instead of just being gone, it turns it into a thing where they're most likely going to try to hide the problem.
And the loss is going to mount.
Yeah.
The psychic loss.
Yeah. And it kind of also reversed it from, like, the tagline we ended up using on the movie posters and such was Invisible Man, Visible Curse.
Great.
Because he's not instantaneously a super being who's invisible and can go anywhere and do whatever he wants. He's somebody who, if people see what's wrong with him, they're going to have most likely a negative reaction. They're going to freak out. They're going to run away. They're going to fire him. They're going to throw him into a psych ward. They're going to do something negative. So he's forced to hide the problem. And in the story, it means he chooses. I thought to myself, what would you do if this was happening to you, and how it would affect the people around you? So I came up with the idea that this guy would leave his family. He had a wife, he has a child, but to protect them from what's happening to him, not in a contagious kind of way, just in a, when they come and take me away, they're going to take you away too. So I'm going to leave. So he
makes himself scarce.
Yes, he leaves the family, moves up north, takes a job in a sawmill, like I said, a northern town where he's wearing lots of layers and he can hide things and gloves all day. And so he's sending money back. So he's supporting his family, but he's removed himself so that they don't go down with him.
And you're from small town BC yourself?
Yeah, I was born in Merritt, BC, and I grew up in Houston, BC.
I'm from Kamloops.
Oh,
good to know you.
Yeah. And I mean, you tend to write what you know.
Yeah.
And I worked in a sawmill a couple of summers. I saw what that environment was like, and I thought, this is something you don't see on film very often.
And tax credits for getting out into the hinterlands.
Getting further out of Vancouver, it gets a little cheaper. And I mean, I gotta be honest, like, we paid less to the owners of a family-run sawmill in Kelowna for 2 days of shooting there than we paid for a men's washroom in a Legion down here.
Jesus,
Because, I mean, to be honest, the sawmill, we could not have paid them enough for it to mean anything to them. They're a big operation. They make big dollars.
But they don't have film shooting there every day.
They'd never had film shooting there.
That's cool.
But the two active producers, the creative producer was Katie Weekly, and the producer that she brought on, his name's Hans Dahl. And but he knew locations, he knew how to get things, and he immediately came to us and said, look, you want to shoot in a small town, you want to shoot in a sawmill. If you go to the middle of northern BC where there is no infrastructure to support filmmaking, you're going to struggle.
Right.
So you want to find somewhere that has the look, but is still close enough to Vancouver that it's not unrealistic to have things being shuttled back and forth.
It's great advice. Like I'm making my first feature this year, and the location for a fishing camp, I was thinking, well, perfect fishing camp is a remote one. Instead, I've chosen Pender Harbor. Let me ask you, is that close enough to Vancouver to get cast and crew?
Pender Harbor, as in Pender Island?
Pender Harbor on the Sunshine Coast.
Oh, the Sunshine
But
Coast.
an hour up the road, near, like, sort of near Seychelles.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what time of year?
April.
April.
Yeah.
You can probably get crew to go stay up that area. It's pretty. It's not the dead of winter. You know, that helps. But I mean, I originally thought, well, I knew people that worked in the sawmill in my hometown, Houston, BC.
Houston's up north?
Yeah, it's near Smithers, Prince George.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's kind of right in the middle of the province, but it has pretty harsh winters. And I initially thought, well, we'll go there, and I know a few people, and I can probably get access to the mill because of people. But then that mill shut down, like after I think 30 years in operation. Like the year I was thinking about filming there, it shut down.
How dare they?
Yeah. But at first I thought, okay, well that's good. If it's not running, then I'll probably have more access to it.
Right.
But as it turned out, everybody was like, no, they won't let you in that place because the liability goes through the roof now that it's decommissioned.
Of course, yeah.
So, you know, and my producer Hans said, you know, you don't want to be an 11-hour drive from anywhere. If your camera breaks, you need a replacement. That's too far.
Okay.
Kelowna's close. And then the other thing was the mill. He said there's a mill in Kelowna. Actually, no, I reached out to a friend of mine who was in the Ministry of Forests, and I asked his opinion on which companies would be more amiable to letting us film in their active mill. And he said, if you go to a big company, they're just going to think liability, and it's not going to mean anything to them. Yeah. He said, I know a mill in Kelowna, family run. It's been there decades.
Right.
Let me reach out to them and see what they think. You know, so he made first contact, and then Hans talked to them as a location manager would, and they liked the idea. A small town story about a guy that works in a sawmill.
Great.
And like I said, we couldn't have paid them enough for it to mean anything financially, so we paid them basically a token amount that they were okay with, and they gave us access, and it looked amazing.
What's the name of the mill?
Oh, the Gorman Brothers.
Gorman Brothers.
Yeah.
All right, so shout out to the Gormans. Good work. Yeah.
Yeah.
These are good filmmaking tips here. Like, you know, thinking of knowing that you were going to direct it. Maybe you could share. Was there a list of? Did you make a resource list? Like basically anything that you had access to, anything that you owned. Did you make just a list of everything that you could get, like a motorcycle, a car, a truck, like, and then wrote your story based on that?
I wouldn't say I wrote it. I mean, you definitely. It makes sense to write what you know and write something that's realistic. That was another thing with this film. I had written other features. I almost made another film before this one, like a year prior to making The Unseen.
Okay.
I got Telefilm support to make a supernatural thriller, also set in a small town, northern BC. But we got funding, and then we tried to put things together. We tried to attach an actor that would satisfy everyone, and it just didn't come together quickly enough. And we started looking at the reality that, okay, now we're not going to shoot in northern BC. We're gonna have to downsize different ideas. And when it got to the point that we were going to lose winter, we were going to have to give up that it was a winter story.
Yeah.
You just realize that you're not going to make the movie you want to make. So we did the crazy thing you don't want to ever do in indie film, which is give the money back.
You're the first person I've ever heard that said they've given it back.
Yeah, no, we got Telefilm funding, and I think they gave us a checklist of 10 things that we had to pull together within a month. And
it had to be by a certain time. They wouldn't wait 2 years. Wouldn't wait a year.
No, they have a year. They have a cycle of a year where I don't know where it is exactly now, but I think you submit by March, and they make their decisions by June, July, and then you have to go to camera by a certain date, or you lose it. We pulled together 9 out of 10 things that we didn't think you could do quickly. Like getting a line of credit to support the tax credits, and the one thing we couldn't do was get bankable cast. because it got really busy in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And we went out to we lost some time going out to some name actors. Like I was working with a casting person in LA, and she would send it out to somebody that we'd suggest somebody, and she'd send it out to them, and we'd wait, and then we go, what's happening? And she's like, oh, I don't know. I'll poke them and see what's happening. And then it's like, oh yeah, no, he's not going to do it.
You can waste an entire life waiting.
I wasted so much time doing that.
Yeah.
When I got to the unseen, I was like, I went to my casting director and I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to waste any time.
Okay.
I said, there's plenty of great actors in BC. I just want to cast local, and get it made. And
is that your advice to filmmakers? So you would just say, listen, just decide by a certain point to get the best cast you can?
Well, yeah, you always got to get the best cast you can get. But it is tricky because there is a scenario where you get someone who's maybe not the best actor for the role, but they bring things to the table. Like I had people tell me before I made the unseen and after I made the unseen, basically, yeah, if you put Van Damme in the lead, we could have sold it. It's like Van Damme would not have led this movie. It would have been a farce. He was not right for it.
Yeah.
And like they still say Nick Cage, you could put him in anything and you can sell it worldwide.
Yeah. But is he the guy?
Yeah. I mean, when it came to casting this film, I said to my casting director, I don't want to waste the time. This has to come together and we have to make a movie.
Right.
And she was like, yes, okay, I hear what you're saying, but you do have a couple of months. Is there anyone you want to go out to? Think a little outside of Vancouver. Is there anyone you can think of that you might want to try? And I was like, well, I did just see this TV show on Sundance called, it had just come to Netflix. It's a Sundance Channel show. And I said, there's this actor, his name's Aiden Young. He had somehow eluded my cinephile gaze because I swear I'd never seen him before. But then I looked him up, and it's like, oh, he was in Black Robe, he was in this, he was in this. He's kind of a chameleon, disappears into things.
Yeah.
But then he did this show called Rectify, which his performance, have you seen it, was amazing. And so we reached out to him, and the other big thing was he was Canadian. He was born in Toronto.
Oh, I didn't know.
He'd moved to Australia when he was 9, so basically raised in Australia.
Yeah.
But he would come back to Canada to work. He'd go to the States to work, and Rectify was shooting in Georgia, and it put him on the map. Like everybody suddenly knew who Aiden Young was, and as the lead in this series. And I saw that, and I thought, this guy's amazing. Who the hell is he? Whoa, he's Canadian. And the response we got back was he's talking to his wife. He wants to read the script again. It's like, ooh,
that's interesting.
That sounds like he's actually considering it.
So, Aiden says yes.
Yeah.
What impact does that have on the rest of the cast?
Basically, I don't want to speak for all of Vancouver, but how I saw what happened next was basically every Vancouver actor wanted to audition for this.
Because of Aiden's presence.
Because of Aiden.
Yeah.
Like Aiden's an actor that some of them probably didn't know who he was until a couple years ago when Rectify hit, and he'd been nominated for Golden Globes and a few other awards. Like suddenly everybody's talking about this performance. So I think actors gravitate to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And they check it out and they go, this guy's amazing.
Yeah.
And
we're going to do great stuff together in the scene, and okay. Yeah, that's another thing too. If you can offer not a crew, a bump up in position and authority and creativity from what they're normally doing Monday to Friday or Monday through Saturday, that's great. That way you can get great people who are hungry and enthusiastic to be there, just like you are, and cast. If you can cast outside their comfort zone, is that what you recommend?
It tends to help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about working with Telefilm, and that is the great golden magical unicorn for so many, and people sometimes they wait years hoping to get that shot through Telefilm.
Oh yeah. I mean, it did take a few years. I did a few. I submitted projects that didn't get supported. I mean, like sometimes they'll support you during the development or the writing process, where they'll give you some money and you spend a year writing, and it helps. certainly helps.
Yeah.
But the real goal is production funding.
Yeah.
And you can get...
It helps. Yeah, it helps if you're going. You really, if you're going to apply for production funding, you should try and get them in as early as possible. Get them to love you early. Get them pregnant, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, most people say you need to come to them for support on the development side of it, writing, attaching cast, and then packaging.
Yeah.
I don't know if they still do packaging as a separate thing, but basically there's steps. You work your way up, and then you come and say, look, we did this together. Let's do the production funding and actually make the movie. But the crazy thing with the Unseen is that I'd done all that for the other project, and when it didn't come together in time, the thought was, well, we'll come back on the next cycle and try to get the production funding again. And they said, well, that's quite possible, but there's no guarantee, because if you're up against different projects and something else takes your spot, you're not going to get anything.
And maybe it's a similar genre, and it's competitive at every step.
It is. But what ended up happening is that I came into Telefilm right before the submission process started. I had a meeting, and I said, look, I can bring you back the same project that you already supported, but my concern is that it's going to have the same problems that prevented us from going to camera on it the first time. I said, this might be crazy, but I have a new project. I've just finished a draft. I think it might be a better first film. That's what I said to them. Because it felt like it was a little bit smaller in a lot of ways and more doable.
Yeah, right. Well, that's smart. That's it's containable. It gives you greater confidence. Probably gives them greater confidence seeing your greater confidence.
I think what they really liked is that I was honest with them and said, I think it's a better first film.
Yeah.
Because by the time I got the final draft, I don't think it really was much smaller or more manageable. we still had a film with 21 cast, and I forget the number, but probably 20 locations. One of them was an active sawmill.
Yeah.
We're going to shoot in winter. We're going to shoot in a small town and Vancouver. And our lead character is gradually becoming invisible.
Yeah.
Which just screams visual effects, and everybody sees dollar signs floating around.
Right.
And
did you have to show them a really lengthy demo reel to show them that you could accomplish this yourself?
Well, they already knew my background, and to tie into your earlier question, I do believe when I came in and I said, so he's going to be gradually turning invisible, but this is how I'm going to do it. And it isn't going to be 300 visual effect shots, because they're very expensive.
Yeah.
I said it's going to be practical effects, which is my world, as much as possible. And eventually it will reach a point where it needs to be a visual effects or a hybrid of, and that's ultimately what we ended up doing. I don't know if there are any shots in the film that you would say are completely visual effect,
Okay.
like the main. It's a use of both, When he starts disappearing, he'll have makeup, he'll have special effects makeup on his face, creating a certain effect, but then eventually there'll be like a part of his head that's just gone, and that becomes a green screen.
Yeah.
You paint part of his head green, but you put a makeup effect in front of it, a prosthetic, and then the green gets removed digitally, and the inside gets created digitally, And I worked with a guy named Bob Habros, who I'd worked with him on set on a lot of projects. He was an on-set supervisor for makeup or vis effects, and so he was the first guy I talked to about this. And I said, how would we do this and not, spend too much money? So how could we do it within our budget? And he gave me good advice, and I already knew coming to it was going to be more makeup effects than vis effects, but still, how can we work together to make them better? And he had lots of great notes about if you put the camera in front of an actor and you want to erase half his head, if he moves around in front of the camera, then it's one type of effect. If the camera moves around him, it becomes a much more expensive effect.
That's exactly the shot I'm planning for near the end of my movie, but I do not want to move the camera.
That will save you money.
Okay.
We talked about there's nodal camera moves. Like if a camera is in front of a subject and it can tilt or pan, they can do that as, I believe, a 2D vis effect.
So that's okay.
That's a lot cheaper
Right.
than trying to do it with a camera doing this.
Right.
Because if everything changes, then it's so much more expensive.
That makes sense.
And the other thing we did, makeup effects also in my bailiwick is puppetry. Makeup effects, puppets.
Like John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yes, exactly. That
Yeah.
kind of approach. Like, it doesn't just have to be something glued to somebody's face. It can be a object that is manipulated by performers, cable-controlled art.
You've done Jim Henson work.
Yeah. I started out doing creature effects, on the X-Files and stuff, puppeteering things.
Okay.
And then I had the opportunity when Jim Henson's Creature Shop came to Vancouver on Cats and Dogs, and Cats and Dogs 2 was a different company, but some of the same people. I think Snow Dogs was a Henson production also, and then a couple of Muppet movies were shot here. And,
Damn.
And I'd done puppetry for film and television enough that when they came to town, I was like, the Muppets come to town. I'm like, well, I don't really do this, but I do this if it's a creature, attacking somebody, and it's all about eye-hand coordination and the way your brain connects to an external performance. I like to think of puppetry as being different because the actor is here, but the puppeteers are here.
Yeah.
And the creature's up here doing whatever, talking. And, so it's the same skills. But, could I make Kermit the Frog sing and dance? No. That's another skill set.
So on your film, how many times did you get to use that?
The first reveal of Bob's problem sort of involves a puppet, but it's a hand. It's a hand that reveals his condition.
It's his hand. Yeah.
Yes, it's his hand, but it was actually it's a fake hand. It's a makeup effect hand.
Okay.
And I tried to puppeteer it. Like, Aiden was sitting on a couch, and the idea is that he removes this tape off his fingers because that was our Canadiana. The Invisible Man wraps himself up in bandages.
Yeah.
We had our guy wrap his fingers in hockey tape.
Of course, that's
He's
exactly what
working
you
in
did.
a sawmill, and this is how he hides it. And I hurt my hand. He tapes it up.
Yeah.
But then later in the film, we reveal his condition. This isn't a big spoiler. It's about 8 minutes in. This is the scene I told you earlier that I moved it about 3 minutes earlier in the edit.
Okay.
The last day of cutting, because I realized we needed this information sooner.
Right.
And so, he's revealing it, and he raises his hand into the frame, and he takes a drag off a cigarette, and then you see that there's parts of his hand missing, and there's fingertips floating around. So this was a fake hand that I was going to puppeteer for Aiden, and on the day, Aiden realized, well, it's a hell of a lot easier if I just do it, because you're not going to see his real hand.
Yeah.
So he just took the fake hand in his hand.
Oh, okay.
And puppeteered his own fake hand.
Wait a minute, do you have to pay him extra now for that?
He was working on a flat, so it didn't change it.
So you recommend the flat rate for such
Yeah.
And how was that first puppetry? Did he do a good job?
What, the hand?
Yeah.
Yeah, he nailed it.
Nice.
And it was another one of those moments, like, because that often happens in film where you have an idea of how you're going to do something, and then somebody says, well, wait, what about doing it this way? And you're like, of course we should do it that way.
Yeah.
It's so much smarter.
Yeah.
And, because I had to raise this thing up and I had to make it look like he was doing it. And if you're a little off, then the actor's going to, find the cigarette.
Right, and everyone can sense it.
Yeah, they sense
Yeah.
the disconnect,
Yeah.
But, with him doing it, he nailed it. He treated it like an extension of his own hand, and he nailed it the first take.
There should be a category at the Oscars for that.
For makeup effect. For puppets?
Yeah, puppet smoking. I don't know.
I think the stunt performers should get something first.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But, that's also a good example because that hand was also a practical effect, but a digital effect, because it basically looked like this. It had a hole in it, and it had 2 missing fingers. So digitally, we added the part of the fingers that was not there, because what was important about it is it needed to be disconnected.
Yeah.
So the tip of this finger is actually completely disconnected from the hand.
Amazing.
And that's what made it the difference between somebody chomped off his fingers or something more, invisibility.
Yeah, it's like alopecia. Is it the condition? People get blotches of white skin.
It's like that, except in the case of Invisibility and the logic of our film, the tissue is still there, You're just seeing through it. So if the tip of a finger becomes invisible, it's still there. Poke, poke, poke. But like, and that's the idea. He's holding a cigarette with fingers that are not all there anymore, and this one's floating around, and then he takes a drag, and it's
okay. For up and coming, emerging, first time filmmakers who want to do a genre film, I'm sure you learned a lot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What would you say, like your top 3 do's and your top 3 definitely do nots?
As related to genre films?
Yeah, or just first film.
First film.
As a genre filmmaker, yeah, if you've got a genre angle, I'd love to hear it. But if you could save people time, hassle, money, what are your do's?
Oh, well, I mean, some of them sound like you probably heard them before, but if it's not on the page, it's not on the screen. So, like, I've met people that aspire to be filmmakers, and they literally hand you the first draft of the script, and they're like, and we're gonna start shooting this next weekend. And it's like, you need to spend so much time rewriting this and refining this and getting notes from other people and taking notes and discarding notes and let it sit in a drawer for 2 months and then try to rewrite it again, and you will find it will get so much better.
Yeah. Did you have like table reads or public readings of the script?
My producer Katie Weekly came up with an idea because what did we do? We didn't do a full. She decided that for budget reasons we couldn't afford to bring all of our cast into a table read situation because you still pay them.
Yeah.
And it was like 21 speaking parts.
Right.
So she was just like...
And they're not just going to show up out of the goodness of their heart. Or they'd love to, but their agents won't allow them.
Yeah, and we went union. That's the thing. Like, if you go non-union, you get a little more... You can get away with things. But I'm a member of UBCP, and I decided... Because puppeteers are part of UBCP. And I decided that, we would get access to more talent if we went union. So and my producer agreed, and we made it work, and we signed with the union. And but that meant that a table read meant you were paying 21 people X number of dollars to come out for a couple hours, and it was going to add up to a lot. And was it really beneficial?
Right.
So she came up with this great idea because we had Aiden, like he was a flat fee situation, and so basically as soon as he landed in BC. And he was great about it. Like, as soon as he got here, he was 100% ours. Like, he would come out for costume fittings and makeup tests and camera tests and just like, and I think he literally worked every single day of our 22-day shoot. It's not like, you had a week off in the middle.
No.
He was on camera so much. There maybe one day he didn't work, but I think he worked every day.
That's it.
But he, so he was there. And so what my producer suggested, she was like, okay, look, the 2 main dynamics in the story are the family, the mom, dad, and daughter, and the group of kids, teenagers that the daughter hangs out with. So she said, instead of bringing everybody in, let's do a day where we sit down, the 3 family members, and do some of their scenes as a table read. And let's bring out that daughter character and 3 of the other young actors and let them spend some time together.
And did you rehearse as well too? Like, is there time on an indie shoot or money for an indie shoot for
not
rehearsal?
Really.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there could be depending on the type of film you're making. You know, like if it is if it's like Marriage Story, and it's really about those two, three main characters, and it's then I think
single room
you can get people in there for a day, a week, and you can rehearse the hell out of it, and you're gonna find the layers and the performances and the tones. But I think in our case, too many different characters, too many different locations. Rehearsing would have been, I don't think it would have worked as well. I mean, it'd be great to have it, but you got to choose your battles. And in this case, I think our table reads with select cast was a better way to go because it let them sort of get a feel for, because you were trying to create the illusion that these people knew each other for years.
Yeah.
So you show up on set with 4 teenage actors and say, hey, you guys have been buddies for 5 years now.
Go.
Go. So, we just put them in a room and encourage them to talk and run a few of the scenes.
And you made 2 choices, or the script demanded that you had a lot of locations. And did that raise production value automatically?
Absolutely, and that was one of our suggestions from Hans, our location manager turned producer.
Yeah.
He was like, I want to get you as many locations as possible. Like in a lot of cases when they're breaking down a script, they'll go, you know what, you could save some time and money if you merge this location with this location and this location, and instead of 3 different stores, they all just go to this one store, and right. You shoot there for 2 days, and that saves time, money, and simplifies things. But as in the genre world, anyone who's ever watched a movie about a cabin in the woods, the main reason they do that is it's one location and they shoot the whole thing there. You basically go there and stay there for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever you have, and it makes it a lot easier. Because I'll tell you, we pretty much had two locations every day.
You were moving
almost every day. We had a couple places we stayed for a few days. The family home, we actually were there for 5 days, which was a luxury. And the only reason that was even possible is that it was actually Hans's house.
Oh, nice.
So
you recommend that?
Yeah, he would never recommend that. And he said, this is the thing that no one should ever do is offer up their own home, but I'm crazy.
I can't believe he's allowing you to tell that story, because you're never supposed to do that.
Well, he'll never do it again.
Yeah.
He just, because we were looking at houses, and I said, I really like this house in Strathcona, and he was like, that's great, but that's going to cost you $10,000 or more. And he's like,
for 5 days.
Yeah, I don't think you could even get something in Strathcona for 10 days or 5 days for $10,000.
For those of you that are watching in Toronto or elsewhere, Strathcona is like Vancouver's oldest neighborhood, practically downtown. Great, quaint old houses.
Yeah.
Bit of a drug problem nearby. So I think they have to have really great security to protect their beautiful old wood homes and the narrow wood staircases.
They have character. And they look great on film.
They do.
You know what? I mean, Han said, save the money, put it somewhere else, use my house. And at the time I was like, yeah, your house isn't really what I was thinking, but you know what? This is one of the compromises I'll make.
Yeah.
And then by the time you cut the movie together, you're like, you've forgotten that it was even considered a compromise.
Right.
It's just where the actors are and where the characters are doing their thing.
And
and you realize you don't need to waste the money on things like that.
What do you need to waste the money on?
Well, I would
invest the money, sir.
Yeah. I mean, it's great to get cast, but good actors like to work. Good material, and that comes what I answered about the script. Put the energy into the script, because I had a lot of people that I reached out to work on this film, and they said to me, when you asked me to do this, and I read the script, I was like, before I read the script, I was like, how am I going to tell Geoff that I don't want to do this because it sucks? And then they read the script and they come back and they're like, I was actually pleasantly surprised. The script's really good, and they're like,
nice.
I was like, well, thanks, that's nice. But,
Yeah.
I've been in that position. People give you something they want you to work on, and it's like you read it, it's like, this is awful.
Yeah. Yeah, and page 1, you're already working on your reply to them.
Yeah. I mean, I've read scripts that were big budget produced scripts, and I'm like 2 pages in, I can't believe this thing was greenlit. It's so bad.
Yeah.
But so you put the energy into the script to make it as good as you can, get as much feedback as you can. If your writing's not cutting it, get help. Just find a way to make the script.
Put your ego aside, get someone else on.
Yeah. And, you don't have to follow every note you get, but it's great to get notes and take them seriously, and pick your battles.
And get notes from different people's and see if there's overlapping notes.
Yeah. I mean, if the note comes back again and again, then it's pointing to something.
Yeah.
And sometimes, good notes will just identify an issue. Bad notes tell you how to fix it. Because
right.
Because sometimes notes will tell you that it doesn't work because this would never happen, and you can't have this happen, and then this is what should happen.
Yeah.
And then you realize when you see that note again and again that that's not the problem. The problem is that I didn't set something up over here.
Right.
So you tweak something over here, and suddenly this note just stops meaning anything because this issue goes away.
Becomes invisible.
I think there was the issue of people of understanding he's invisible, not rotting away.
Right. Yeah.
And we found
it is a hard concept.
It is
to imagine. I see you.
Yeah.
But you're kind of blocked by the camera. Maybe you're full.
So I mean, where else to put the money? Post, like.
Yeah.
If you
especially for your concept.
Yeah, I mean, vis effects and stuff, because nothing brings down the overall impact of a movie more than like bad sound, bad vis effects.
Yeah.
If it looks or sounds cheap or bad or incomplete, you just immediately disconnect from the movie.
And you said sound first, really. You must instinctively. I'm surprised, given that you're such a visual artist.
Well,
but we know in our bones if something's wrong, if it sounds tinny and shitty.
Yeah. If it sounds canned and or they don't sound like they're in the room. There's a quality to sound that even the average viewer can immediately identify as something's not right, even if they don't know the technical reason.
Yeah.
Even if they're not realizing that what they're hearing is ADR and it's just not good. That's dialogue you record after the fact and put into the actor's mouths because something on the day didn't work. A train went by. And
right.
You can't cut that out of the dialogue, so you have the actor revoice it later. If that isn't done really well, it just looks like bad dubbing.
And we're all expert viewers and listeners by now, whether we think we are or not. We've seen so much and heard so much.
I mean, I think the sound is the thing that ruins it for people more, because editing, like the picture quality, yes, you can have bad picture quality that will take you out of it too, but if it's shot well and it's cut together well and your coverage was good and your performances are there, then that's something you almost have more control of. And like editing, you can keep working the edit until it gets good. Like I had scenes that some of my worst scenes when I first put them together, and I was just like, I don't know how we're going to save this. Because they're not working, it forces you to work harder on them. And it's sometimes it means you need to go shoot something else and add it. Like we did do a little bit of additional photography.
Oh, did you bump a little more money out of Telefilm for that, or?
No, we just found more money. Actually, we budgeted for some of it.
Okay.
But really, I mean, you hear about big budget movies that do reshoots, and I've worked on reshoots where you spend 2 weeks and they use this much of it. They spend millions doing weeks of reshooting and then they barely use it.
Wow.
Or they replace the whole third act. Like I've seen those too. But in our case, it was like there was one element. We had bears in our storyline, and when we shot the film, we didn't have bears, and we even thought we might be able to just imply that there's bears, talk about them, don't actually see them.
Okay.
But it became obvious that we needed to see them, so we did.
I was going to suggest invisible bears, but that doesn't sound.
They're cheaper.
Yeah.
They're cheaper than the ones we got. But yeah, our additional photography was mostly a whole day of filming real bears with animal wranglers and.
Damn, where?
Up in where did we shoot? It was Britannia Beach.
Oh, okay.
There's a big gravel pit up there. We turned a corner of it into a fake garbage dump and brought in real bears.
Yeah.
There's an animal trafficking storyline in the unseen, and so we hired bears.
Gotta have it, yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. To go back to editing, it just seems like editing something that if you get it all right in the cutting and the sequence, and you have the footage, you go to post-production and they just reassemble it with the high quality, the master footage. So if you've done your part right, then they're just putting pieces together the way you want it. And then they do a color correct, which is a creative, artistic vision, and that can be screwed up. Like if you don't color correct, the film's going to look bad. And if you don't get to spend enough time color correcting. Like I learned from my short films that I needed more time color correcting. Because it's not cheap. You go to a professional house, you're paying, I think, like $400 an hour to color time your film.
Yeah.
And it's more than, like, color timing comes from the idea that you just make different shots match the brightness, the contrast, the color. You know, if you film something on another day or with a different camera and the lighting's changed a little bit, you can adjust the levels in post to make it all look the same. But you're also applying an overall creative look to it, and that's where the DP stays in the process, and he's like, I want this to be warmer or cooler, or, you know, and so that kind of stuff. That's an important part of post, but it's less of a giveaway than just bad sound.
Yeah.
If your edit doesn't sound good, people check out. If your VFX look bad.
Was it Kevin Smith when he went to the Weinsteins in Miramax with Clerks?
Yeah.
And it looked like shit. It was shot on black and white, and you know, not that black and white's necessarily bad, but he knew that he wasn't a gifted filmmaker, but what he has is a really, really funny script and good sound.
Yeah.
And that was a saving grace.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's like El Mariachi, you know, it talks about it being a $7,000 film, and, you know, I don't know the facts and figures, but in a lot of cases, it's like, yeah, he shot a movie for $7,000, and then a studio decided to release it, and they poured another $500,000 into it to make it everything it could be.
Yeah. Not
reshooting it, but, you know, reworking the sound to make sure it's great.
Yeah, because he kept cutting away to the dog every time it was out of sync, right?
And I don't blame him, you know, because if a studio is going to come in and pick up an super low budget indie project and put it on 1,000 screens and marketing expenses, you know, it means nothing to them, and it's smart to come in and say, hey, look, we can make this look and sound better. Yeah, we
still love the story about you know how you funded it.
Yeah, we're not telling you to change anything. We're just going to make it look and sound better.
What was it like with your crew working on? I mean, back in the day, Vancouver and BC was supernatural thriller central. It's the X-Files. If you were doing a sci-fi show, it was probably shot here. And now we're in Hallmark land.
Yeah, we have a lot of that.
And the unseen types, the genre films aren't made as much here, or we're not hearing as much about them. Is it tough to explain to a crew what you're trying to do because they're so used to the whatever Hallmark Christmas movies are paying their mortgages?
No, because I think the stuff is still done here. It changes. Like in my years of experience in Vancouver, when I started, we were a genre TV town.
Yeah.
You know, we had X-Files, Stargates, and things like that, and that was our bread and butter, and that was the main thing. And then we became more of a feature town. Like TV work got replaced by big Hollywood features.
Yeah.
You know,
The Sixth Day, I think they blew up this
beautiful
library we're in. Yeah.
I worked on that for a couple days.
Oh, you did?
It's gone through cycles where, you know, suddenly we were shooting the biggest genre movies, like X-Men 3 shot here, and it was I think the most expensive thing that had ever shot here at the time.
Right.
You know, and now it feels like we've kind of moved back into a TV town, and it's a lot of the genre superhero stuff. You know, we have all the Supergirls and Arrow and all that. Arrow just finished, but, you know, all that DC Universe stuff, that keeps a lot of people employed. So I've heard in some cases features want to come to Vancouver, but they can't because the stages are all rented by TV shows now.
Well, yeah, and how are you supposed to get, for your next film, for the film to that, how are you supposed to get people and space unless you get outside of Vancouver?
I mean, to go back to your, I think you said 3 pieces of advice for indie filmmakers. Yeah. Another one is do your damnedest to pick the right time to make a movie in Vancouver or wherever you're making it.
Okay.
And it's hard to do that because you have to predict it ahead of time.
Yeah. You
can't just go, hey, look, Batwoman and Supergirl just wrapped and it's a bit of a lull.
Right.
Let's put a crew together and go shoot a movie next week.
Yeah.
You're trying to do that 3-4 months ahead. You're trying to figure out when will be a good time.
And typically avoid July, August, I presume?
Yeah. It used to be a lot more predictable because there were shows that shot for 10 months and they started around a certain time and there was gaps, and winter used to be quiet. Now it's not.
Right.
A lot of TV shows in Vancouver finish March, April. And if they're coming back, they come back like June. So
Okay.
that's a gap.
Yeah.
But
That's what I'm trying to dive through.
yeah,
April, May.
yeah. So you can look at production lists and see when shows are starting and finishing.
Oh, smart.
You know, but we are
Yeah.
a busy film center, so if
Yeah.
there is a 3 or 4 month gap in the general flow of things, shows will jump in there.
Right.
You'll get a mid-budget feature come to town for 3 months, and they know crew's going to be freeing up in March, April.
So 1 month gap, great. 2 month, okay. 3 months now.
They're just, if a stage is vacant for 3 months, someone's going to jump on it. If a good crew is available, like you get everybody's a freelancer, but if like I think the 100 shot 5-6 seasons here, and then they went on hiatus, and pretty much the entire crew rolled over onto Batwoman. And then they picked up the 100 for another season, and they didn't go back.
Oh wow!
So
they lost them.
Yeah, they're on Batwoman now, and that kind of thing happens a lot. But in the indie thing, you gotta try and pick your battles of when there will be crew and equipment and facilities available, because the people that rent the gear, they're happy to help indie filmmakers.
They are, yeah.
They're not so happy to help student filmmakers.
Right.
Because if you roll in there and you go, I'm a genius and I just graduated from film school and you should give me everything for free, they go, okay, here's an estimate.
Yeah.
5 figures in it, and it scares them away. But if you show up at a rental house and you say, look, I've been working in the local industry for 20 years and this is going to be my DP, and they go, oh, we know Steve. And, they go, we could work something out. And, they know they're planting seeds for the future, so they will give you help.
That's great.
The same with crew. Crew will come out and help you for cheap or for free if they're not all getting better offers. Like if they're not going to leave a paying job, full-time paying job to come work on your thing unless they happen to have a gap.
You must have got a lot of goodwill coming your way, because I'm sure that you've helped other people with their projects over the years.
Yeah. I mean, it helps to know people in this industry. It helps that they believe in your vision, and they've worked with you as a professional in another capacity. I mean, yes, you're coming in and saying, yes, and I wrote this, and I'm going to be the director, and they're like, oh, I'm used to you being the guy that makes the monsters, but it's a genre thing. I think you can do it. Okay. And it's just all having faith in you, having an opportunity to do something new for them, an upgrade or a different direction. I mean, for my film, it's a genre film. It needed makeup effects, and I did something that's a little unheard of in in filmmaking, professional filmmaking. If you hire a makeup effects lab, a makeup effects designer, they generally do the whole movie because they don't want to be working with their competition. So you can't say that you're going to do this and he's going to do that.
Right.
But I knew 2 guys that I had worked with on Falling Skies and a few other projects. And one of them was an animatronic builder who had worked with the Henson Company in the UK but moved here. And I knew him, and I knew this other guy named Werner Pretorius who came from South Africa, and he'd worked here on a lot of big shows for a local company. And I knew in my gut that those 2 would be the best choice to head up the build of our animatronic puppet elements. And it just so happened that they both left positions at a local company to start their own company.
Perfect.
So my film was their first big project. Well, it was an indie film, but it was the first thing that they were like, oh, we're actually going to get paid to do something.
That's their showcase.
Yeah,
for their company.
And they were happy to do it and happy to help me.
So get people at the start, even though they're already veterans.
Yeah, it helps. I mean, because I don't know. I mean, it's so weird. Like, okay, Aidan Young was in Australia when we cast him. It's a makeup effects movie. We need life casts of him. We need someone to do an impression, a mold of his head, of his hands, of his teeth, so we can build these things for him.
Yeah.
You can't wait until he gets here and then start building it, because you're going to be paying him to do nothing while this stuff's being built. So what you do is you find a company in wherever the actor is. Sometimes it's LA, sometimes it's Toronto. You hire a company there to do the life casting for you. So I reached out to a company in Australia, didn't know them, and I said, look, I've been making a movie in Vancouver, I need some life cast done, and they sent me a quote, and it was like, this is ridiculous. This is so much more than I could ever pay for this, because I know what it really costs.
Yeah.
And if he was here, I have people that would do it for free. I can't do this. So I reached out to another company I'd never heard of, guys I didn't know personally. And they had just done a little movie that became Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, man.
But nobody knew about that movie yet. Hadn't been released. Like, no one knew what it was, how amazing it was. And one of them won an Oscar. Like, their company won an Oscar for makeup on that movie. I reached out to these guys, cold called them or emailed them, and just said, look, I'm a makeup effects guy doing my first feature. My actor's in Australia. I need a family and friends rate. What can you help me? And they sent me back a quote that was about a fifth of the
that's great.
of the original quote. And I was like, this I can do.
Yeah.
And then they sent me photos. They did the live casting, and they sent me photos from the casting. And it was the owners of the company doing the work personally.
Cool.
Because they knew that's how they could justify charging less.
Right.
Because it's them doing it, not paying people to do it.
Great.
You know, and they were just super helpful, and they just
So
they
mom and pop shop.
Yeah. There's a company called Odd Studios in Sydney, and like I still haven't personally met the guys, but they did me this. They helped me, and that allowed the film to happen. So, yeah, I mean, reaching out to different venues. I mean, I know people that do indie films, do short films, and you know, they sometimes ask me to do makeup effects on them, and sometimes I'll help when I can, but I don't run a shop. I don't build this stuff anymore. So you need to find someone who will do that for you. And if you ask the biggest, busiest shops in town, it's unlikely they're going to help you. But you find someone new that's got a small basement shop or garage shop.
Yeah.
They might help, and that's usually how you get something. And you get a lot.
You want to get Bill Gates when he's over his garage.
Yeah. And that's why I got Amazing Ape is the name of the company that built for my show, and it was the first project that their company did. And they poured themselves into it, and sleepless nights, and quoted me less than they should have quoted me, and realized after the fact they should have charged more for that because but they did great work, and it shows in the film,
and they'll be proud of it.
And now they do like 4 or 5 different shows in Vancouver. They're doing The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. They're doing Batwoman.
You open the market to them.
Snowpiercer. Well, I can't take credit for their good work getting them jobs, but like when it's nice when you
open their minds maybe to it, going, we should look outside of.
Maybe doing my film made them realize that this was viable and they could do this and work for themselves instead of working for someone else. And
that's very cool.
So I mean that's how you get quality in your films, I guess.
And
Find the right people.
You chose to go handheld all the way through.
Yeah, I forget.
Like it's a lot, right?
It's just, in a lot of cases, it's quicker. Okay. You know, because when you are setting up a camera on a rig, on a dolly, on a crane, on even sticks, or some more elaborate rig, it's just time. Because you go, okay, we'll block the scene, and we're going to put a camera here, and it's going to be on the dolly, and it's going to do this.
Yeah.
And then, okay, let's set it up, and 10 minutes of laying track and putting the dolly, and then get the dolly on there, and then move it and go, oh no, it's not right, we got to get the dolly off and move the truck over.
And you're looking at your watch.
Watching the time tick, and everything takes time. If you do something where you're like, I'm gotta apply VisFX to this shot, if it's doing this, it's going to be a lot harder. So you don't do that, and then they do the effect, and then you add a digital bougie.
You clever man.
It's not me. It's smarter people than me have done it for years.
More great advice. Just, surround yourself with really smart people.
Yeah, surround yourself with people that know what they're doing, and they will help you. Like I told you, Bob VisFX supervisor Bob, he was like, if you do it this way, it's this much. If you do this, I actually brought, like, we have one sequence in the movie, which is where most of the VisFX and the animatronic puppets happen. or there's only one. But and even like there's always vis effects happening when the puppet's happening, because he'll have a rod attached to his arm that has to be erased.
Right.
So yes, you're saving a lot using a puppet. And I mean, I learned this on Cats and Dogs. You think you're making a movie called Cats and Dogs, and you have real cats and dogs and puppets, and you think, well, they're going to do some scenes with real, and they're going to do some scenes with puppets. But what I learned from working on that, conventional film shot, the over. If it's us, they shoot over my shoulder. The shot's about you.
Yeah.
You get the side of my head and my shoulder.
Yeah.
That's where a puppet works really well. You got a cat, and you're trying to shoot it, and trying to get two cats to do what you want. Not so much. But you shoot over a puppet onto a real cat.
Yeah.
This cat will do exactly what it's supposed to do every time.
Right.
Because it's just being alive and maybe doing a look, and maybe its ears go down, you know. That's what we did with the unseen. We had a puppet that we would use for mostly overs on the other actor, and then we'd come around on Aiden for a shot that was then vis effects treated to make him look the way he's supposed to look. But then we go back to the puppet. Or we do medium shots of a puppet throwing a punch. And we got away, we used the puppet more than my DP even thought we could. You know, he was like, I don't know if we're going to use that. But what got me on that is that when I was editing that film, or that sequence, it's a fight scene with an actor in a makeup that's having vis effects applied to it, and he's fighting a puppet. Or the other guy is fighting a puppet sometimes. I did two things. During the edit, I had my stunt coordinator come in and give me notes on the scene. Like, we sat there at the editing suite and watched it together, and I was like, how can I make it better? This is your world. How do I make it better? He's like, take a few frames out of there. Don't use this angle, because that one doesn't really sell the punch. This will sell the punch.
Great.
You know, that fall didn't quite work, but if you take out a few frames, it'll be better. You know, and then I did the same thing with my VFX supervisor on that scene. Bob came in, and he was like, you know, take this out, this will save time, this will save money.
Yeah.
You know, and I think at the end of it, because VisFX works in frames, like literally, if they have to do VisFX work on a shot, and that shot is 180 frames, it costs this much.
Sure.
If that shot is somehow 150 frames, then it gets cheaper and cheaper.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some base costs if they're building models or developing things, but the number of frames they're rendering, every frame costs.
Smart. So have them there for key moments in the editing.
Yeah. And I brought him in early in the edit, and he literally said, trim here, trim here, trim here, trim here.
Great.
And it was kind of like I told you earlier. It's like, it's almost perfect. I can't trim that. You're crazy. Yeah. And then I went, and I think after the meeting with him, it was like, he was suggesting I cut out like 750 frames. And I was like, there's no way I would ever cut that many. Maybe a few here and a few there, and it's going to ruin it if I do that. And by the end of the edit, it was like, there's 750 frames on the floor.
Yeah, you cut out, yours was 2.5 hour cut.
I think at one point it was 2.5, maybe a little more.
And it's now down to
110 minutes.
Nice.
And even that's a little long, you know. Some people will say it should be 90. It's an indie film. It's a genre film.
Horror films 90. Comedy, if it's like one location, Hush, with the deaf woman in the glass house in the woods. Yeah. Comedies, sure, but you're going after something different.
Yeah, and that's the main thing. Yes, it's a genre. I described it as a dramatic film with a genre vein running through it. Yeah. Because the Invisible Man, it's not like he turns into an Invisible Man on page 10 and it's just invisible chaos and hats floating around and stuff all the way for the next 80 minutes.
It's how he deals with that trauma.
Yeah, it was a human story, and I mean, he's hiding it, and the critical response to the film was very good.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at it lately, but last I checked, we still had 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that that's not 200 reviews. That was like 9 or 10 reviews. I think we had, because they have a weird system of whose reviews actually qualify to be on Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay, yeah.
And because a lot of our reviews were from genre festival reviewers and stuff. They didn't have the street creds to actually qualify.
But they know the world so well.
Yeah, but I mean, our reviews, when we played festivals, our reviews were like, very, very positive. Like, occasionally somebody would have nitpicky notes, but I don't think we ever got a terrible review. And then when it came to Rotten Tomatoes, the 9 reviewers that qualified all liked it, so we had 100%.
So how are you going to pour this knowledge, all this knowledge about how to do and do not do an indie film? How are you going to pour that into your next project? What have you learned the most?
I mean, it depends what the next project is. I have a few different ones that are raring to go, and one's a supernatural thriller that I mentioned. One's more of a straight up horror. One's actually, what do they call it now? It's sort of sci-fi. I think they call it near-fi, near future sci-fi.
Okay, like 5 minutes in the future kind of thing.
Like Looper, kind of.
Her.
The kind of thing which it's basically our world, but something new, a new technology, a new event.
Oh, I love that.
Adds to it, as opposed to Star Wars, Star Trek, 2001. So I mean, it depends which project is the next project.
Well, you knew what made a good first film.
Yeah.
What makes a good second film? Like what is it?
Someone else paying for it? That would be a great start.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
You got some money? Well, yeah, we should wrap up soon. So you want someone else to pay for it? Should Americans? Blumhouse, perhaps.
I'm trying. One of the positives that came out of making The Unseen is that I got a manager, an LA-based manager.
Oh, great.
So, and I mean, I've heard from a lot of people, have realistic expectations out of things, because if you go into it just absolutely assuming that this is going to be the next Get Out, it's going to be the next breakout horror movie, and I'm going to be the next Jordan Peele. Yeah. You're probably going to be disappointed at some level. So there were times where I was like, what is a realistic expectation? And one of them was I would take critical success over financial success. I would rather make a good movie that is well received than a bad movie that just happens to make money somehow. Because there's lots of those horror movies that are terrible, but people go watch them. I went to festivals and I was like, I went and watched other movies that were at the festivals, and I'm like, I don't think it's very good, and the critics didn't think it was very good, but somehow this screening's packed because it had a buzz.
Yeah.
And some genre film people love, or audiences love, the campy stuff, the cheesy stuff, the campy actor in the lead, Yeah. And my film didn't have that, but at the end of the day, the critical reviews were great, so I was happy with that. And then at some point I do remember thinking, well, if I don't find my next big break out of the gate right away, I would like to at least get some representation. Someone in my camp.
Yeah.
And I screened at an LA screening, and this manager that I had cold emailed, I think I sent out 10 emails to 10 management firms, and one guy showed up from one firm. He stayed till the end. He tapped me on the shoulder at the end of the screening, said, really like the film, we should talk, I gotta go, but I'll email you. And I met with him the next day, and we talked. And
it's a good ratio, 1 for 10.
Yeah, and that's the kind of that's how it rolls,
Yeah.
I mean, because we all hear about the stories about movies that blow up and they have 25 different production companies fighting to make it.
Yeah.
But really you just need more.
And the director, he's an overnight success at 22, and
22, and then he's making a Marvel movie,
Yeah.
So,
but the numbers don't back that up.
Statistically, it's not going to happen that way for very many people. But you keep pushing, you keep trying.
Be dedicated to a great story over everything.
Yeah, that's what we found. It was the story and getting the right performers to tell that story really raised everything.
Right.
Julia and Aiden just they put so much into those characters that everybody who worked on it saw it happening, and everybody who watched it said, wow. So
how would you like us to wrap up?
How about a dance?
Well, listen, I have to thank you for your generosity, sharing the stories and the do's and don'ts. It's a huge help. Whether you realize it or not, you are automatically a massive inspiration for anyone that's watching this, because you've been through it.